The Building Better Relationships Journal and Meditation. We created the Building Better Relationships Journal and Meditation so you can magnetize the better relationships you want and focus on the positive role that you have in creating a better life through your relationships. We are excited for you to discover the gold within you that can help you manifest the love we all crave. The Building Better Relationships Journal has coaching questions that help you listen to the truth of what you want and what helps you to be empowered in love. The Building Better Relationships meditation is designed to strengthen your heart's ability to be that change you wish to see in the world. Why not download it now and think of it as a gift to those you love? If you love journaling and meditation, this is for you. Welcome to Building Better Relationships at Home and at Work with Angela and Patti podcast. This is Patti, a leadership and work-life balance coach from Arizona, USA.
And this is Angela, love and relationship coach from Sydney, Australia. And we are building better relationships with you.
Sharing new perspectives on being heart-centered at home and at work.
So you can draw on your inner power to make your relationships and the world a better place to be around.
When staying silent feels safer than speaking up, but deep down, silence is costing you more than honestly ever would. Welcome, everybody. Hi, Angela.
Hi, Patti. Good to be with you.
You too. So many of us have learned to keep the peace by staying quiet, but emotional suppression creates tension, resentment, and disconnection. In this episode, we're going to explore how to communicate honestly without losing yourself or the relationship. This one's a tough one, Angela.
Yeah. We've been drinking lots of water in the preparation. Like there's something that has to be moved. I can talk a little bit about that later with the energy of it. But yeah, I wonder why it's so tough.
I think because we really want our relationships to work, and it's something that a lot of times we don't know what we want or how we want it or how to communicate it, and getting emotional about it too and not looking at both sides, I think sometimes really makes it difficult when you're in a relationship that you're scared about. You're scared that you might lose that person, or you're scared that you might lose your job over saying something. It can be scary.
Yeah. So today in this episode, we're going to look at the different scenarios of speaking up at home or in personal relationships versus speaking up at work. There are some different dynamics in both scenarios. And in particular, I'm going to start with looking at what is a fallout. So with the title of the episode is How to Speak Up When You're Scared of a Fallout. So we thought it would be interesting to explore what is a fallout, or what do we think is a fallout. And I'm going to look at it from the point of view of our nervous system as well, and our fear of fallouts. So in personal relationships, when we don't speak up, it's because we're fearing a potential fallout. So that means there's two things, and we're going to look at both options today. Firstly, it's the fear of a fallout, which hasn't happened yet. And then there's the actual fallout if something does happen. when there's a misunderstanding in the relationship, or two people don't see things the same way, when someone gets angry or upset or hurt when you say something, and you actually do have the fallout and you witness that. So what stops us speaking in the first option is the fear of what we think the other person might feel or what we think they might do. So it's a very different scenario. The nervous system is pre-preparing for this potential outcome that hasn't happened. And we make a lot of stories from that limbic brain, from the emotional brain. One of the things I think, Patti, that makes it so difficult is the emotional brain is wired to sense fear. So it goes through this scenario of potential fear of all the time. So most of the time we speak up, we don't speak up because of this story. We're afraid of this potential thing happening, and it's a story that we play out in our head. And the story actually can be stored in our emotional body, which is connected to our limbic brain. It's the most powerful part of the brain. It's one of the oldest parts of the brain. It's one of the smallest parts of the brain. So it's that irony, the smallest things in our life have the most control. So it's deep inside the brain. It's always worked before language. Our limbic brain, from very early in life, before language has started storing these fears. It's also part of our ancestry for thousands and thousands of years to protect us. But actually, it's a very strong emotional storyteller, and it's often non-verbal. So speaking up can be a perceived threat because we might create problems. And many, many times it's actually not to do with the other person at all, but it's about the fear of what that person might do if they don't accept us, if they don't like how we speak, if they don't like what we say. So I feel like this nervous system response is in both the work and the home environments, Patti, but it actually operates differently in the work environment when a fallout or a fear of fallout has different consequences in the work environment when we speak up. So I'm just wondering if you can share on that, Patti, how fallout or the fear of fallout operates in the work environment.
When we're in the work environment, we want to do a good job and we don't want any tension or any conflict, but it does happen because you have people that are competing against each other for promotions, for wanting to get more prestigious projects. And when that happens, at times you have leadership maybe pitting each other against each other, really causes a very competitive work environment. And that can put people against each other, and conflict can escalate. People can get defensive. There is another thing that you're afraid to speak up because you're fear of retaliation, that your manager or coworkers might retaliate against you. So those are some examples of things that can happen. And when you have coworkers that are not working together but against each other, that really causes damage to the business and to each of the coworkers and individuals working as a team. Another example is, say, an employee wants to speak up about their workload. They feel like they have a larger workload than other coworkers. So they bring it up to their manager, and the manager reacts very poorly and starts piling more work on. So that is something that, can really damage their work environment by being afraid to speak up and having retaliation. So, why are people scared of fallouts, Angela?
Yeah. So part of that nervous system I'm going to go back to in this section where we look at the why is what I mentioned before. Our nervous systems are wired to look for signals in our environment where we can create either being included and avoid exclusion. So we're tribal animals. So from the very beginning of our lives, when we're raised as children, we are wired to try not to upset people because we want to be included. So sometimes when we speak up, it can be anything from, I watched this amazing video on tantrums yesterday. If we have a tantrum as a young child, and instead of being nurtured or comforted in that moment, we're basically told to be quiet, and that might be the pleasant way of saying it. Or we're also looked at like, what's going on with you? What's wrong with you? Even those things, like children express through tantrums for many reasons, basically because their body's not understanding what's going on, or they could be upset about the way a sandwich is cut, or there's so many reasons a child could have a tantrum. But even that, the way we're raised, just by expressing ourselves emotionally, if we're raised to not, that's a bad thing, we can be conditioned from our nervous system that it's not safe to speak up or express myself where there's emotion involved. So there's a lot of things in childhood upbringing and conditioning that affects our nervous system's perception of speaking up. And then even after childhood, there's just past experiences. Any one of us could have any life experience where you said something and it got received poorly, or you got told you're an idiot or that don't do that. So when we speak up and we have a life experience at school or later in life at work or in our teenage years, any experience in our 20s, it could really make a very strong impact on the nervous system. And we start to just feel scared about speaking up in general. So some of the other things that we're tribally wired is we want harmony in the tribe. We want harmony in the family or the group that we're living with. So sometimes if another person is upset, we can actually be scared that they are hurt. So if you're in your environment, in your living environment when you grow up, or when you're in a family environment, you can often get fearful if someone else is upset. And that can go into our nervous system on a really deep limbic level where you just are scared when others are upset. You don't know how to respond. You don't know constructive ways. You just go into a fear response. So we often have embedded in our nervous system also fear of conflict. We don't like it. A lot of us are scared of conflict, and some of us are more energized by it. Others like run away. So that's a fear and flight response. And another thing that we tend to not like speaking up about is something where the society or the group likes everything to be kind of balanced or boring or vanilla or the same. So we kind of tend to think if I rock the boat, that might lead to something where I get rejected by the group. So it's very ancient, this conditioning, Patti. It's kind of trying to keep that tribal vibe and connectivity going. It can also be just, if I speak up, I'm the center of attention. And sometimes being the center of attention is a good thing in a group, and other times it's not. So if you've had any experiences like that, it can be frightening.
Being singled out.
Yeah.
You know, you're
Yeah.
work environment, say you're at a meeting and you're singled out because somebody didn't like something you did. That can be very uncomfortable. Or say you're afraid that of saying anything or speaking up or having a fallout with somebody because your job or a promotion can be at risk. You may fear that if you have a fallout with the group, that you're looked upon as being difficult or you're causing chaos, you're dramatic, or you're not being a team player. That can be very hard because you want to be a team player, but you also don't want to be taken advantage of. So you're trying to balance that line of, should I speak up or shouldn't I speak up, because of the fear of what's going to happen. Angela, so just like what I just said, how do you communicate when you're scared of a fallout in your personal relationships?
Yeah, I think this is the reason why we're doing this episode, is to start sharing some of the tips that you and I have had in our work lives and personal lives, because it's, I don't know about you, Patti, but I think for me, it's where a lot of clients struggle about. I mean, if you're in fear, it's hard to communicate.
Yeah.
So we're going to explore a few strategies in the work environment and in personal relationships when you're scared. It plays a little differently in the work environment, but it impacts the nervous system in a similar way. So, Patti, can you outline for us how to practice a conversation ahead of time in a work situation to get over that hump?
So what I recommend is that you sit down and you think about the conversation, what you want to have, and practice the conversation ahead of time. And why are you wanting to have this conversation? And what does it mean to have this conversation? And how am I emotionally feeling about doing this conversation? And why I feel I need to do this conversation. Practicing is one of the things that make you feel more comfortable and really think out how you're going to communicate your need to get it across in a good way. And why is emotional safety really matter to you? Can you look at the situation and say, okay, you communicated what you needed, and it may not have turned out the way you wanted it to, but you had communicated it and it gave that other person a chance to reflect later on the conversation. And how can you make the other person and yourself feel emotionally safe? Where do you have the conversation and when should you have it? That's a good question to ask yourself. Identify your fears or your triggers. What's triggering you to feel that you should have this conversation with somebody? And how can you reflect and step back and prepare your message and communicate it with kindness and clarity? And after you have the conversation, reflect afterwards, how did it go? I think that's important because you're going to be communicating with this person or the team or your manager throughout your whole work experience. So you need to learn their communication style so that you can communicate with them in a way that won't trigger them, and that you both can sit down and really talk it out in a calm, professional manner.
Great. And can you give us an example of how you might actually walk through this prep when, like, you want to speak up at work?
Yeah. So what I do is I write down what I want to say or an outline of what I want to communicate and why. I think that's so important, is why. Why is it affecting our relationship, our work relationship? I walk away and reflect on my words. How are they coming across? How do I want them to receive it? And I practice how I will deliver the conversation until I'm comfortable with my words and my delivery. I think that's what makes it very important, is really knowing what you want to say, how you want to communicate it, how you want to come across, and think about the other person, how the other person will feel, how they will react, how I might feel about it as well. Another good way is, like, Angela and I are coaches, and to get a coach can help you practice and feel more confident, so that you're kind of doing like a role playing of the situation and how you want to feel about saying what you need to say. Then the next step is I will schedule the meeting and the meeting place somewhere private but not intimidating, somewhere where we both can feel comfortable and actually feel that we can communicate and it'll be okay, not somewhere where you might not be able to really sit down and talk. You really need to listen to the other person's point of view, let them talk, and really listen to the words, how they feel, and their suggestions on what they want as well, whether you agree with them or not. And let them be heard as well, because you want to be heard. They want to be heard as well. After the meeting, reflect on how the meeting went, what you learned from it, what you could have done better next time when you communicate with that person. And also, you might need to set up another time to get together to talk about it again. But, not harshly. Especially after a meeting, sometimes the best time is to let it sink into both people, and then schedule a meeting to get together to talk about what was said, how we can get together and work through this and work together as a team, or as two individuals can help each other at work. And remember, you did your best to communicate your needs, even if the other person may not have responded favorably. They now know what you want in the relationship, and that's a start. That opens up the communication.
Okay. I really appreciate how you're thinking about the other person, because I think from my experience with the nervous system and how we respond, That's actually a very difficult step if you're in fear, but taking that time to think about how will they react, that's a sign of maturity. It's not something that the nervous system is necessarily going to do. So I'm going to look at how personal relationships is different to the work environment. And we tend to not just fly off the handle in personal relationships when we're upset about things. We also tend to not think about the other person, or we think about them in a certain, not only a negative light, but in the light of what I shared before, where we think they're not going to respond favorably. Or we make up a story that they are always like this and they never do this, they never understand, they never do what I ask them to do. In personal relationships, we don't have that level head that you're talking about to think about the communication.
And we throw things out from the past at them and them at us.
Yeah.
And that's hard when you're thinking, oh my gosh, is this going to be a battle, or is this going to be actually something that we can talk about?
Yeah. And then a lot of couples, they say, we can't talk about that because it ends up in that dynamic. The emotional body responses, the fear response is just throwing it back and forth as a way of trying to move the fear, but it doesn't. It just loops into a fear response or a reactive response. So emotional safety and psychological safety, it's a big term now, Patti. They use it in the workforce here in Australia, and creating environments that are psychologically safe. But if we don't understand how things are not safe, or like you shared earlier about how to communicate in the workplace and think about why are we speaking? What do I want to achieve from this communication? And think about the other person as well. That's where you start to create environments about emotionally safe environments to communicate. But as I said before, if we grew up without emotionally safe environments, it's very natural to come from a reactive fear response. So some of us are just going to explode. If we can accept in personal relationships that that's a part of how we respond, because it may be just how you were raised not to feel safe, then you can actually look at, okay, I exploded, and the next step we're going to look at is how to repair later. But sometimes what stops us speaking up is that we've had an explosion and we feel like we're a bad person. So we tend to try to not speak, so we go back to explosion. So that's one of the type of responses in personal relationships. It's reactivity, explosiveness.
It builds
some of us
up.
are, yes, because you've avoided.
You've been pushing it down, so it builds up and explodes. I know I've done that.
Yeah.
I keep, I've been pushing it down for a long, long time, and then all of a sudden, whoom.
And you know how, like in the work environment, you said you've tried to find that intimate space that's the right time for the conversation. Like in personal relationships, we're thinking, is this the right time? Is this the right time? And then you don't do it because something else happens in the house or you get distracted, and it's never the right time. Yeah. And so then you keep putting it off, and then it explodes as well. And another part of the nervous system is the flight response, or the avoider. They just avoid speaking up. So some of us are avoiders, and that's part of a nervous system pattern as well. Just avoid the conflict or avoid speaking up because it's easier than dealing with the potential conflict. So if we know these cycles of avoiding and then waiting until you explode, then you can start to see, oh, well, I'm in that cycle of explosiveness or avoiding for too long and then I explode, or I'm just an avoider. Or are you a blamer? This is another pattern. We tend to say, oh, that person never brings anything up. I'm the one that's always bringing everything up. I'm the one that's always coming up with the solution. I'm the one that's always starting the conversation. And we kind of pigeonhole the other person as the avoider, which they may be, and that's not their fault. That's just how we're raised to avoid conflict. So sometimes we tend to go into blaming the other person, and we're the one that's doing all the work, or we're the one that's taking the initiative. It's a sneaky way, Patti, of kind of like avoiding speaking up. I'm the one that's, doing all the work, and I'm the one. Because you're actually just saying you want someone else to come and rescue you, or you want someone else to be your equal partner. But the way we learn to communicate in personal relationships didn't start as equal partners. It started with an adult communicating to a child. And if the child hasn't been taught how to speak up when they're fearful or when their emotions are coming up, they will explode or feel unsafe when they explode, or feel like ashamed when they have exploded. So one of the things was that tantrum video I saw. It was quite clever, actually, is if your child is going through tantrums, one thing we can do as parents to help children learn how to communicate safely when they explode, or to feel safe when they explode, is to actually just hold them, a hand on the shoulder, hand on the back of the heart, a hand hug, whatever the child, what you feel instinctively is good with young people, and just hold them, and then some gentle words. Say, it's okay. Yeah, it's hard sometimes when this happens. Just acknowledging that. And then they found that that can help the child learn that explosive emotions are okay, and then we move on. That's the really fascinating video I watched, because I saw how as adults, when you don't have that conditioning of how to respond when the explosion happens, then we go into thinking we're a bad person. So the next step we're going to look at is how to repair from that. So in an emotionally safe way with our relationships, we have to acknowledge that sometimes we don't have the skills, and that's okay. We're just all learning. I certainly know sometimes when I've been in explosive situations, I do avoid, because I'm a very sensitive person. And when I'm explosive, I feel ashamed. So I just allow myself to see what I'm feeling. Yeah, I feel terrible that I exploded. And I kind of will look at that next on some repair tools. So first thing you can do in personal relationships is to notice what is your trigger that makes you explode or avoid speaking up. So maybe you delay things, or maybe you're scared of speaking up because you're fearful of a certain reaction from the person. So creating emotional safety in personal relationships is for you to look at your triggers and to look at your patterns. That's the first thing. And then you have to create emotional safety for yourself, because if you didn't learn it as a child, the only way we're going to learn it as an adult is to create it for ourselves first. You can do it with a partner that's in touch with you, or a coach, or somebody else as well. But you do need to create that emotional safety for yourself first by witnessing your triggers. Once you've identified the trigger, you can look at the specific fear. But if you haven't identified the trigger, it's harder to do this step. So you want to look at what is your fear if you speak up? Because once you know the fear, you can catch it. And I can hear you having a little clearing there, Patti, as well. Sometimes
Yes,
even
sorry.
these symptoms, no, that's part of it. Those things, I actually have a lot of sinus stuff at the moment because I've been clearing this energy of speaking up. And sometimes when I work with people, the energy literally manifests as a physical thing where you're coughing or clearing. I've had this huge sinus release the last October. It's been huge. It just, when I work with energy work, sometimes they can be clearings like colds and mucus and things like that, are clearings of old energies around speaking up or not being able to speak up, or a fear of speaking up. And so I've got a few tips then on how to communicate when you have that discomfort, that fear. You can, like Patti was sharing with the professional situations, really prepare your message. And I've got 3 simple things to say, 3 steps. Firstly, you focus on something you appreciate about the relationship or the person. And the example I've got is, I really value that you're here for me, or I really like it when you say nice things to me. And the second piece is to be transparent, vulnerable, or real about your discomfort about sharing and speaking up. So you could say, I want to share something with you, but I feel uncomfortable or I'm shy to share it. And when we say that in personal relationships, it just lets the person know that you're being vulnerable, you're a bit scared, you're a bit shy, whatever you're feeling. So that tends to, in personal relationships, put people less on the defensive and more receptive. And the third thing is to ask the person if they're open to listening or ready to hear what you want to say. Now, this doesn't work in all relationships because some people are like, just tell me what you got to say. But by asking them, are you open to hearing what I've got to say? Is this a good time for you to hear this? You can check if they're not distracted, they're thinking about a meeting they've got to go to, they've got to go out to the shop and buy something, if they actually have time, if they're present, if they're available for you. So there's many ways to say these 3 steps. First is acknowledging something positive. Second is sharing your vulnerability about speaking up. And third is saying, is this a good time? Are you ready to hear it? And you can do it in many different ways. And the golden rule from the Gottmans, who are relationship experts, is to really balance your communication, any potential negative communication, with 5 positives. So that's why I always look at trying to foreground something positive about the relationship. Now, is this 3 steps always going to work? It may be that you need to say something a bit more directly at times. So I'm just giving you an example of how to try to encourage positive communication from a place of sharing where you're vulnerable, as well as a way to create safety for the relationship to share something that is maybe a little bit tricky for you to share. So now, Patti, we're going to look at how to communicate after a fallout, and maybe some repair tools. And can you give us an example, maybe, of some tips we can use when you've said things that have affected a work relationship and you want to repair it, and maybe some tips of what to do if we're looking to come back to the relationship and repair the relationship if some fallout has actually happened. I know before you mentioned something about reflecting on the relationship and the timing piece. So maybe you can give us more on that.
So I'll give an example. Say you were talking with somebody and you got into a heated discussion in the work or at home, and it escalated, and you both removed yourself from the situation. Or you actually said to that person, I think we need to step away and meet again later to discuss this, to calm down, to regroup. And I've had this happen. So I said to the person, let's stop this right now, and we'll meet again in an hour or so. That way it gave you time and them time to reflect on the situation, really think about why did it trigger both people? Why did it escalate to where it escalated to? What could I have said differently? What could they have said differently? How can we get back together and look at the common goal of the situation? That here's two people that work together, that need to work together, and whether it's on a project, whether it's just teamwork, give it some time to really reflect on what happened and name what happened without personalizing it. Reset your expectations and the next steps. Give it a couple hours, a couple days, and reschedule another meeting if needed. And it probably is needed, because if you don't talk about it, the damage will continue. So you really need to meet up again. And a lot of times when something like this happens, when somebody explodes or both people explode, they're both, like Angela said, you're feeling like shame or oh, what the heck happened? Why did this happen, right? I didn't want this to happen. Neither person wanted this to happen. So sometimes both people need to reflect on the meeting, and then they will see things differently and want to make it work. And the second meeting really goes smoothly because you both can talk about what happened, how you felt, how you wish it didn't happen, hopefully, and want to resolve it and come up with a solution. So those are some things that I've actually experienced. And once I sat down with the other person, we both came to a conclusion that we really wanted to work together and that we didn't want that to happen. And we're able to move forward without falling out. And actually, I think it made the relationship better, because we realized from that encounter that we wanted to change things and make things better. It's just having the courage to step back and reach out to make it work.
That's significant that you both realized you both wanted to make it work. And you didn't bring up the fact that you did have the explosion. You didn't bring that up and beat the person up with it moving forward. You let that you let that rest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in personal relationships, as you mentioned before, Patti, we might tend to bring things up from the past, try to give evidence to that part of the brain that still says, you're not understanding me, you don't love me, you're not listening to me, you don't want to listen to me. So I think in personal relationships, that recycling of the conflict or the way that you behaved, that's a way of actually deferring, going deeper into, why am I exploding or why am I triggered? It's a natural response to just protect yourself. And what I think I've learned from personal relationships is you have to pick your battles. Are you going to really make it about the way the person communicated? Or are you going to make it about what you want from the relationship? Because most of the conflict is not really about the topic that you're fighting over, whether it's housework or the way the person lives their life. And it's actually about you not being seen or heard or recognized or understood. It's more about that intimacy, that we really, really want to be understood by the person in personal relationships. And we get upset because we feel they don't understand us. And it depends on the relationship, but if it's a close relationship and they don't understand you, that can trigger a lot of hurt and a lot of suffering. But if someone that's not so close, why do we project on them that they need to understand us? So one of the things about an actual fallout happening, sometimes you need to actually decide, what am I actually upset about? And if I want to repair the relationship, what do I want from the relationship? I think your example, Patti, was brilliant because it's saying that both the people wanted to move forward. So that gives you a goal. But we don't tend to do that in personal relationships. We still tend to blame the other person. They should do this. They don't understand me. We have a lot of stories about not being seen, not being recognized, not being heard, and not being understood. So in personal relationships, if we have a fallout, the trap can be, this is separate to what I was just sharing, the trap can be that we think we failed in speaking up. And then we make another story. When I speak up, it can lead to conflict or the other person will be angry and will not understand me, and I won't get what I want. So one of the repair tools is to just not see it as a failure. You have to train yourself not to see it as a failure. You have to start looking at each conversation as an opportunity to learn how to speak up to get what you really want. Not telling the other person what they should be doing, but what do you really want from the relationship? And I think that's the main thing I got from the example you shared, Patti, that in personal relationships, we get stuck in a lot of the small details. It could be about cohabitation, which is a hard one, because some people do live differently and they're raised differently, so you are different. But we really actually avoid what we really want from the relationship, and we get stuck in some of the smaller battles. And what we really want in the relationship is for the person to maybe see that they don't understand us, and then how do they get to know us better, or how can they recognize what I really need, what I really want. And we get stuck in some of the practical details about maybe cohabitation or how we think the person should be in the relationship versus the connection that we want the person to understand some of our needs are not being met. So if you can keep learning to speak up without, if there is fallout from the conversation, treat it as an exercise of learning how to speak up in spite of fearing that there might be a consequence. But if I speak up and make the other person guilty or wrong, that's not really going to move you forward. You have to really think, what do I really want from the relationship? I want us to be able to have a conversation. It could be something really practical about we're going to move forward in how we make our decisions around finances, or we're going to move forward in how we make our choices about where we're going on a vacation. You have to really have clear outcomes, not keep on thinking that the next conversation is going to make the other person think the way I think, which is, I find that so funny, Patti. In personal relationships, we always think they have to think the way I think because that's how I'll get what I need. And it really works like that. I mean, I do agree with my partner sometimes, but I don't necessarily think they have to think the way I think, because that would be kind of meaningless in terms of having a relationship. But I'm fascinated by how some couples actually think that the partner should think the way they think. I thought, oh, well, okay, then that sort of defeats the purpose about having a relationship with someone who's not you. So now let's go to longer term strategies for practicing keeping up. I already gave you some tips around that to develop these long-term strategies to support you to speak up. It's always an exercise of the next conversation and trying to learn how to speak up in spite of feeling insecure or fearful. So can you share, Patti, how you speak up consistently in the work environment?
Yeah, so one of the things is knowing your coworkers and knowing their communication style. I think that's real important on how to communicate with them and them with you. You know, there's people that just like directness, straight to the point. There's other people that like chit chat, you know, kind of, and there has to be a balance, right? But learning everybody's communication style and really wanting to be able to communicate with that person is real important. And maybe setting up weekly meetings, weekly one-on-ones, or a weekly lunch with somebody so that you can talk about things and really nurture that work relationship. And really think about your roles, your expectations, and your boundaries. And always remember the golden rule. How do I want to be treated? Now, sometimes you need to think about how do they want to be treated, not how you want to be treated, right? When you're trying to communicate with others. Maybe you like directness, but that person doesn't like directness. They like a little bit more, a little toned down, a little bit more. Or maybe they're a storyteller and they like to tell you step by step everything, but you're direct, you just want straight to the point. That's the way they communicate. So you need to be able to compromise. When they're talking to you or you're talking to them, try to use their style. And that will help in a lot of ways to communicate better with one another. And you can figure out their style by the way they talk to you. And they can figure out your style by the way you talk to them. So just learn the communication style and things will go a little bit more smoothly for you and for them. And they may not use your communication style with you, but you can use their communication style to them. And you're showing respect and you're trying to communicate in a way that they understand.
Thank you, Patti. That makes it a different environment for speaking up versus it's almost like you're trying to feel what helps a person to manage that programming they got about speaking up. You're helping them to
Ask questions. Encourage them to speak up, to say what they want. You know, by asking the questions, you know they're there, they want to talk to you. What, you know, ask them. What would you like to say? What would you like to talk to me about? Be open, listen. If you're going to ask them, listen to what they have to say. Like I said earlier, whether you agree with it or not. People just want to be heard.
Right.
And they're not feeling like they're being heard. That's why they're afraid to speak up. But once they feel that you're really listening to them and they're being heard, then both people feel like they can actually have a communication and being respected and all of that.
And so I'm going to share more from the point of view of the self when you're perhaps feeling fear or lack of interest in speaking up. And for long-term development of strength and courage to speak up, it really is about noticing when the tension starts in your body or yourself about speaking up. If you can become finally attuned to, I don't want to speak up, can you notice that? Can you notice any triggers or signs like being passive aggressive, perhaps? That's a classic sign of not speaking up. Are you avoiding the person? Or maybe you're feeling, why bother? I don't even care about the person. So these are all signs. Another really interesting sign that I think we take for granted is everything's going so well, so why should I speak up? It's like a whole bypass because things appear to be going well and you just say, I'm not going to bring it up. So they are clues that you're not speaking up. And yes, sometimes it's not worth speaking up. So that is a real thing to consider. It's not really worth speaking up. Like I mentioned before, pick your battles. Is it really that you're worried about, or is it something deeper? So we can be not speaking up for good reasons as well, but just always being attuned to the tension in the atmosphere of the relationship, in the house. Are you not speaking up to avoid something? That's a big clue. And check in with yourself. Do you feel something needs to be said? And what would help you to say that? So the long-term habits for speaking up is really understanding how you can give yourself that emotional safety, the mood, the atmosphere to speak. And that can be an ongoing journey. We're going to be doing more podcasts about getting over the fears of walking away from relationships, if it's time to walk away, or how to be in the relationship. We have several podcasts about that. So one thing that Patti shares with us is also encouraging words to help us speak up. And this is an ongoing program that you can try. Patti, can you share how to use affirmations to encourage speaking up?
Yes. So when I was in the workplace, I would say affirmations to and from work, during work, just to keep me on track and to help me. So for this podcast, the affirmation that we're going to share is, I communicate openly and honor my needs. And just repeat it. It's supportive. If you're feeling like you're struggling with this topic, you can say this affirmation, I communicate openly and honor my needs. And just say it over and over again. And it's calming, and it does put you in a space of mind that you are communicating openly and honor your needs.
Thank you, Patti. That's great. I can feel it. I'd have to say it and get my body into the feeling of it, but even the word openly, it changes my throat and how I could say it. And the other thing is, if you want to keep working with us as well, we can support you to navigate those difficult conversations. So our links are in the description below the video and the podcast if you want to work with us to help working on that ability to speak up and communicate freely, or to really say those things that you've been avoiding saying.
So let's take a moment after this episode to really reflect on, where in our lives are we quieting our voice out of fear? Reflect on this question and really look at why we're quieting our voice and what does need to be said. And what shift can you make today to change that? And Angela and I want to thank you so much for watching. And until next time, bye.
Thank you, Patti. Thanks, everyone.